What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on the 335. It needs an oil filter housing and oil cooler gasket done. It's been leaking for quite a while and I've been neglecting it, unfortunately. But we're gonna do it today. I'm gonna show you how step by step and we'll get it done today. It shouldn't take too long. The only pain in the butt part is you have to take the intake manifold off to get one of the bolts, but shouldn't be too hard. I'll show you guys how to do it. So we're just gonna dive in. I'm gonna kind of show you what we're gonna be doing and then we'll get started. All right, this is my 2008 335 Xi N54. So this is the oil cooler housing, or this is the oil filter housing. This is the oil cooler housing right here that has oil lines that go to the oil cooler. Both these are leaking. They have been. They've gotten oil like kind of everywhere. But we're going to be changing those. If you have a cowl filter still, this is going to be a little more difficult. If you have stock airbox still, a little more difficult, just because it's more to remove. But the first step, I already took the engine cover off and I took the under tray off because there's going to be a lot of coolant coming out and a lot of oil. And I also recommend that you change your oil while doing this because you have coolant and oil running through these, so they're going to mix and you don't want coolant in your oil, so it's just a good idea to switch that out when you're done. So I already have those off. I'm going to take the filters off and I'm going to take the charge pipe out, and then we'll get started on undoing the intake manifold, and then we'll change the gaskets and we'll be good to go. So let's get started. One thing that I forgot to mention before starting this is what you're actually going to need to do it. So here's what I got to do it. They do sell a kit on FCP Euro. I got this cheaper, so I didn't order their kit. But you need your gaskets. This is the oil cooler, I believe, and then this is the oil filter. You're going to need coolant because you're going to lose some, so it's a good idea to have some. And then I got a full liqui-moly oil change. From ECS Tuning, actually, and has like a new drain plug and stuff. So that's for after. We're gonna do this after, and then coolant to top it off, and then you got both your gaskets. And those are really all the parts you're gonna need, plus tools, and you're probably gonna want some degreaser and cleaning supplies because, well, mine's pretty dirty, so I'm gonna want to be cleaning all that while I'm doing it. But that's really all the parts you need to do this. Alright, we got the Active AutoWorks charge pipe out, disconnected the map sensor, don't forget to disconnect that. Got the air filters off. If you have an air box, obviously just remove that. And now we're going to start removing the intake manifold. You will want to unplug this, I don't know what sensor it is, it might be oil temp sensor. You're going to want to remove that, and then there's one bolt for the oil filter housing that's right behind this runner for the intake, and you can't get to it unless you take, there's two ways to do it. You can take this completely off, or I've seen people just like scoot it back, but either way, you're going to need to remove it. I want to clean mine and kind of inspect it, so I'm going to pull it completely off, and we'll go from there. This is an 11, and there's I'm not sure how many bolts completely, 12. So we'll get started on taking the intake manifold off, and I'll come back and cover anything that I didn't cover before I started doing this, but we're gonna get started on that, and we'll go from there. intake manifold's finally off. It was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be, and that's mainly just because of this. It's like a wiring junction where all the wires run underneath, but there's basically just 2 or 3 T25 bolts on the bottom of the intake manifold, and I just wound up pulling it off of the motor and then laying it there, and then undoing all the Torx bolts, and then, you know, pulling the manifold off. I also removed the throttle body because it gave me a little more room to move the intake manifold around, but there's all we basically have to take off. So now you can you can inspect your cylinders, see if you need some carbon cleaning. These are actually relatively clean, but you know, the whole motor needs a little cleaning. So we're gonna pop the upper radiator hose off. Let the coolant come out of the oil filter housing because it runs right into it. And then we will undo the oil cooler first, and then we'll clean it up, and then we'll take the oil filter housing off, and then we'll clean that up, and then basically just slap it all back together. So it's not like a huge job, there's just kind of a lot to do. But this right back here, see that bolt right there? That's the one that hides under the intake manifold. So I could have just slid the intake manifold off enough to get to that bolt, but I wanted to pull it off and kind of clean everything, so wanted to do it right. So now we're gonna get started. I'm gonna pop the hose, and then yeah, we'll keep going. Alright, after a hot minute, we finally got everything off. It's super dirty. That's why you don't let it leak for that long. But that's sitting in degreaser. I'm trying to clean this up as much as I can. So I got the cooler housing off, and then the filter housing. One thing I will point out, it's easier to do all this if you remove the cooler housing first. So you have your lines, your oil cooler lines, and those are held in the bottom. You'll see them by one bolt. It's like one 13 millimeter. Then you push the lines out, get the lines out of the way. Then there's this third bolt you can access for the oil cooler housing. Remove that, pull the oil cooler housing off, and then that gives you better access to this bottom bolt for the filter housing, and then it comes off easily. I actually wound up breaking this coolant flange, which goes right there. It's really common. I forgot they're like the Mickey Mouse coolant flange or something dumb like that. It just degraded. There wasn't really a lot I could do, so I'm gonna have to find a new one. I know they make aluminum ones online. I might try and find one local first just to get the car back up and running. Now that that's all apart, I'm gonna take some time to clean this, probably the rest of the night, and then we will come back tomorrow morning and we'll reassemble everything with new gasket and change the oil, and we'll be good to go. So I'll see you guys in the morning. Alright, you guys, we're back on day 2 of the oil filter housing gasket. I spent quite a while cleaning everything as best I could. I'll show you here. Basically just tried wiping this all off as good as I could. And you really want to make sure that this surface is clean where the oil filter housing actually sits. Just make sure that's real nice and clean. I tried to clean off some of the residual oil off everything. You know, it's a little hard. I don't have like a power wash or anything, so I basically just use brake clean and try and get everything off. I cleaned up the housings as well as best I could. They look a lot better. This is the oil filter housing. So both gaskets sit on the filter housing. This is for the oil cooler. and this one is for the actual filter housing itself. They're pretty straightforward. They look literally identical. They only go in one way. So there's that, and then here's the oil filter housing gasket. So we're gonna put those in, but I'll try and get everything else back together today. You know, including manifold, charge pipe. I should be able to get like all that on, plus the intakes, and then I'll just have to wait for that coolant fitting to show up, and yeah, then we'll change the oil and stuff. But for now, I'm gonna get these filter housing back on, and then I'll put the cooler housing back on, and we'll start putting everything back together. Pretty simple. I would definitely take your time cleaning though. That is very important, and it's just nice to have a clean engine bay. So let's get started. Alright, you guys, this is what the gasket looks in. So this will basically just sit against this block here. Be careful when you're putting it in. So now you just have to grab the bolts that you had before. I'm gonna actually double check that this gasket's right. So then we're gonna set it here, and the long one goes up top. You're basically just putting it in opposite of how it came out. Pretty simple. Now that that one's on, we're going to do the oil filter housing, which just slides in like this. This one's a little more difficult. Right, like that. So oil filter housing bolts are bigger. So the oil filter housing is an E11 and the oil cooler is an E12. So keep that in mind, you will need two different sockets. And then it's changed just like that. You're all change the gasket, no more leaking. You do want to be careful with these bolts. They are aluminum, so you can break them and strip them. So I'm going to get started putting everything back together. So put the oil cooler on, put the coolant hose on. Obviously I can't do this yet because I don't have the part. And then we'll put all that back on, and then we'll go from there. Alright you guys, a little bit of an update. I forgot to hit record, so I didn't get any of me putting this back together. But I got the oil cooler back on, bolted in underneath here, and everything's tightened down. Everything seems to be good. I just put the old oil filter back in. Reason being, I want to start the car, make sure nothing leaks, because I don't want to waste a new oil change on if it's just going to leak. So I'll leave that in there for a minute. Get everything back together, start it, make sure it doesn't leak, then I'll just do an oil change real quick. Another thing that I want to point out is this upper coolant hose is, I might have broke it. There's basically an O-ring that sits inside there, and it basically just expands over time, and then it pulled out when I was taking it off of the thermostat or coolant housing, and it basically won't go back in. And from what I've read online, you can go find an O-ring that might fit, but you know, it's probably going to leak eventually, and I already have to order a coolant flange for that, so I might as well do an upper radiator hose. So it's something to keep in mind if you guys are doing this at home. Maybe just extra parts you can do. This is easily a project that's doable in a day. I started late in the day yesterday, so I didn't have a lot of time, and then I wanted to really clean everything up better. So it's definitely doable in a day, so maybe order those two parts and replace them while you're doing this, because it's a good time. You already have the hose off and everything. So basically for tonight, I'm just gonna try and get the manifold back on and probably the charge pipe, and then that's pretty much it. And then I'll order those coolant hoses this week, and we'll finish out the video when I get those. But for now, I'm just gonna put the manifold back on, get that all buttoned up, and put the charge pipe back on, and then we'll go from there. Alright, you guys, we're back. It's been about a week. I had to order some parts. I had to order an upper radiator hose, and then the coolant flange for the water pump to the head that I broke off. They both just kind of fell apart, so I'm really glad that I'm replacing them. But I bought them off ECS. Let me show you what I actually got. So this is the old upper radiator hose, and it's just corroded, and yeah. I mean, the car has 118,000 miles, so she's up there, but it got pretty nasty, and it probably would have broke on me anyway. So I just got this. It's like it's an OE equivalent. It's a Hudson product. Got it off ECS. I think it was like $30. And then this is the coolant flange. This is ECS's brand. You can get like no-name ones off eBay, but since I was ordering the upper radiator hose, I thought I'd get this too. But it's nice, it's billet, and it's all anodized and whatnot. So we're gonna be putting that in. A little update, I got the manifold back on, charge pipe, intakes, just kind of button that back up. It looks a lot cleaner in here than it did. Still needs a good spray. But so the upper radiator hose is right here to the port here, and then the radiator, and then our head like flange adapter thing is it's really hard to see now. It goes right there. You can kind of see the hole right there. That's where it goes. So it should be a super easy install. Just 2 bolts, and we'll put it in. And then we're just gonna put a little coolant in it and start it, make sure nothing leaks, change the oil, and you're all done. So I'll get started on putting that stuff in, and then we'll make sure it doesn't leak. And I really hope it doesn't, because that would suck. So let's get started. Alright, you guys, just like that, we're all done. Everything's buttoned up. Everything is just a lot cleaner than it was. This billet aluminum piece is actually really nice. Good quality. And then I got the upper radiator hose on. That just clips in, super easy to install. So now we're going to turn it over and just cross our fingers that it does not leak anything. Alright, you guys, we're all done. The car works, no leaks, everything's good. I'm gonna get an oil change done on this, and then it needs a well-deserved bath, so I'm gonna do that next. Overall, this isn't that hard, to be honest. If you have all the parts ready to go, it should only take you a day. Obviously, I had to order stuff, so it took a little bit longer. But yeah, it's not bad. Hopefully this helped you. If you want to see what's kind of involved, and if you want to do a DIY, that's basically it. Really cleaned up the engine bay a lot too, and now I'm not shooting oil all over the place. I would recommend replacing the serpentine belt now, because it's always a good thing to get done on these cars, and I'll probably do that next actually. So yeah, hopefully that helped you guys. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'm going to go get new wheels for the E30. So stay tuned for that video, and we'll see you next time.